Welcome to the Resilient Household podcast. We are incredibly excited to be kicking off a brand new project together. My name is Chris Cirullo, and I've got my two friends here. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm Frank Fallica.
And I'm Jordan Ciciotti.
Love it. And we are a bit of a rowdy bunch at times. We're going to start out mellow, hopefully, and you guys will kind of see as things evolve. But the point of this show is to come alongside and to equip fathers as we aim as believers and fathers to build resilient households in a chaotic world. And there are so many facets to this, and there's so much that we are excited to talk about, but we can't dive into all of it yet. We need to build the foundation first. And so over the next probably 5, 6, 7, or 8 episodes, we're going to be building a case for you. And we hope that if you're diving in at any point along the journey, you'll come back to this first episode because we're going to lay the foundation for fatherhood. And then we're going to slowly but surely and intentionally outline what we need to know about becoming a resilient father that then builds resilient households. Anything you guys would want to add to that as we're kind of like giving vision to people of like where we're going on this journey, what we're going to be talking about, why it's important. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I mean, hey, if you don't mind me going first here, I think it's really important to actually give a little bit of like our own backgrounds and everything for this too. And it really helps put into context like who we are as people. And I don't think any of us want like desire for this to be some sort of podcast where we're talking at people. I personally would like to have people kind of feel like they at least get to know me through this. So I'm going to be very open the entire time. I mean, I'm already going to be showing like scooters and messy porch and stuff in the background. So
I was going to say, do people really want to get to know you, Frank? I mean, that's the question.
You know, the episode number 1, they probably think that they do. I'll let them be the judge of that over time. They might be like,
yeah. I love it.
I'm over them, but yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited to be on this, embarking with both of you. I just think from a high level view, this is really exciting because not only are we faithful followers of the Lord Jesus Christ and married, we also have 15 children represented between the three of us, which is pretty awesome.
Come on.
And I'm all for arranged marriages when it's with setting up my sons and daughters with the fine specimens that come from Frank and Chris here. So yeah, just honored to be with you guys. And if I could just share from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 10, just to drive home the point of what you said a few minutes ago, Chris, about laying this foundation and laying the groundwork. I think that's so important. Anytime you're going into a venture, anytime you're starting something new, it's important to understand where you are so you know where you're going and always coming back to that kind of true north. So, you know, hey, if I get off the rails here, or if I start deviating, what's my kind of guiding true north? And so when Paul talks about the foundation he lays, he says this: according to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it, for no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. And so that is what we're seeking to do here. We are building our households collectively, between the three of us together, but also with you listening and tuning into this. We want to help resource you to come alongside and champion you and encourage you to join us shoulder to shoulder, arm to arm, and see how we can build more resilient households as outposts for the kingdom of heaven together. So yeah, I'm excited.
I love it. And I love that you said outpost there at the end. For those who are listening to this and not watching, you'll have to forgive Jordan. He's got a giant puffy eye. He's dealing with like
I got in a really bad street fight.
Yeah, street fight. I mean, there's a lot of things
the other guy,
but
yeah, it's more it's full bloom here in Michigan where I live, and spring has sprung, and I usually don't get bad allergies, but for whatever reason, I and a couple other kids of mine have just like this itchy sore throat, itchy eye stuff going on. So
yeah,
it is what it is. But
this year,
I couldn't be too beautiful on camera.
the pink eye trees are in full bloom.
Yeah, that's right.
Totally. Yeah, well, and it's interesting too. I mean, you mentioned you never get allergies, and our next episode we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the fight that we are in as fathers, and I think that's kind of like a perfect analogy, or I guess example, maybe not an analogy, of some of the things that we are up against. Like, what are the chances you never get allergies and then you have it flare up the moment we're going to sit down and record this podcast for everybody else, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
There
so
was some other like
I did
spiritual
to
attack I won't go into, but there's more spiritual warfare attack going on with me, and I know even Frank, and I'm
yeah.
sure you too, Chris, like having, as we're trying to set this up, as we feel the Lord burdening us and putting this on our heart that we need to move forward in this. It's like the op of ops, Satan coming
Oh
after
yeah.
us, you know?
Well, yeah, and I think all of our kids have been getting like some crazy sicknesses, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's nuts. So we'll save that for our next episode, which I'm super excited to kind of dive into, because I think it's a necessary conversation that's going to be done in a really balanced way. But for today, I mean, we got to lay that foundation, like you said, and the foundation is Christ. And I think we need to talk about, like, what did Christ come to do? And I think this conversation is one that is often perhaps misrepresented unintentionally, or even uh, people miss the nuance that is involved in this. And so I want to share um, kind of a perspective that I have of fatherhood and how that relates to Christ and what he did. And then I want to get your guys' response, riffing, nuance to all of that. And like we can just continue to chat through this. But I've been meditating for the last couple of years on Genesis, and I'm looking at Genesis, and I'm realizing in Genesis 1 that there's so many archetypes that are given to us. There's these first mentions of what God intends to do with humanity, and what his heart was and his intention was. You know, the cool thing about Genesis 1 and 2 is that it's pre-fall. So there is no sin. And what we are getting a picture of is God's unadulterated view of what he wanted most for humanity. And so in his infinite wisdom and creativity and imagination and power and authority, when he could have done literally anything that he wanted to, he chose to create an earth, and then to make a man, and to put him on the earth and say, you're going to essentially be my vice regent and ambassador on this earth, on behalf of the heavenly kingdom. And I want to do this with you. We see that, like in Genesis 3, he's walking with Adam in the cool of the day in the garden. Um, you know, then God says, it's not good for you to be alone. I'm going to give you this wife, this helper. You're incomplete. Like an A-frame house that only has one side, it can't stand properly. You're incomplete. So I'm going to give you this helper. And then I command you, be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, and rule. And I think people often think of, they over spiritualize the like fruitful language there. It's like, oh, it means have a fruitful life. No, it means have kids who have kids who have kids, and go from two people to lots of people, and take the ways and principles of God into all the earth, bring order out of chaos, bring human flourishing because of what you do, and subdue. There's going to be friction and opposition. But God's original archetype was for a father at the helm of a family, to be the vehicle that, when he could have chose anything, he didn't create a church, an institution, a school, a government system. He created a family, a father at the helm, and said, this is what I'm giving you. And then in light of that, he calls himself father. And we see Abraham, you know, the exalted father and the father of many nations, Abram to Abraham. We see even in the New Testament, people will often argue like, oh, well, patriarch and father ruling and all of that stuff, that's only for the Old Testament. Well, what about in Timothy and Titus, when Paul gives us the outlines and the prescription for the type of man who is qualified to lead in the church? Like, the overwhelming majority of that is that he's a good father who leads his household well, and his children are obedient and in the faith and all. Like, the role of father is absolutely critical for the mission of the church today as much as it was critical in God's good design before the fall. And so I think a lot of men, they don't take on the weight, or they don't realize the importance of the role of father. So I'm curious, like, you guys take that riff on it, like, what's that stirring up for you, and where do you think we should go with this conversation?
Well, there's one thing that I think really stands out to me with the whole beginning pre-fall Genesis, the story and what had happened and why. I mean, you just covered. It is crazy to think that the first thing that God decided to create within this earth that He created was man, right? And you brought up a point too that touches on this. So the fruitful part of creating generations and generations and generation and a whole lot of people, which means a whole lot of fathers and what would be also their wives and daughters and everything that He had added with Eve into the mix, there was this understanding ahead of time, obviously by God. He's all knowing. He already knows how this story is going to go into the future. So we are meant to do that because God knew that there was going to be chaos. Chaos was designed into the world. It was not necessarily meant to be us that are supposed to be the chaos, but chaos would be here, and it was going to be our responsibility to bridle this chaos. The more that we act like Christ and the more we come to be like Him, the easier. That's the only way that you can actually do this. The only way that you can actually kind of crush that chaos and then subdue it. And I mean, it's just crazy for me to think on a I guess let's like oversimplify that thought. This was supposed to be warfare from the beginning, right? And we always talk about this. We'll get into this in future episodes as well. The spiritual warfare, physical warfare. Should a father be prepared to engage in warfare, both physical and spiritual? Yes, absolutely. Why? Because God designed warfare into our DNA, into our past, our present, and our future. It was always part of His plan. Always was. So the role of a father is like greatly undervalued. And I guess it's wild to think how many people are not really taking their role as a father seriously. And I think that all of us have been a victim to that at some point.
I mean, even the Hebrew of formless and void of the earth in Genesis 1, it's I may butcher the pronunciation, but it's tohu vavohu, which means basically chaotic nothingness is how that's translated from the Hebrew. It's like that that explains it all, right? Like it's nothing, but it's also chaotic. It doesn't have form yet because the government structure of God that is ushered in by fathers and families has not been brought. And subdue in that Genesis 1:28 is like, it's this word picture of subjecting and placing your foot on the throat of something. Like it's a forceful, like, power oriented shift that takes place as you subdue the world. So yeah, I like totally agree. Jordan, what are you thinking?
No, that's I concur with both of you guys. What's been said, I do find it curious that when we look around our world, we see an attack on masculinity, an attack on biblical patriarchy, an attack on all that God has designed man through Adam to be, even pre-fall, but even post-fall. There's still the ordinance and the commands and the responsibilities that God has put on men, fathers, husbands, to be able to carry out His mission into the world. And so when you look at our culture around it, it would be just like Satan to take the fathers out of the homes, to degrade the family, and essentially make gender roles be reversible, right? Or anything men can do, women can do better. And I'm not anti-woman. I'm actually pro-woman, which is why I think having both a male and a mother and a father in the home able to raise up children just as God intended is not only optimal, but it's vital for what God has called us to do. And so when you have, the second mom essentially is what a lot of fathers are reduced to in our culture today. Or, you have this idea of, well, if you want to be a father, that's cool, but don't have too many kids, right? If you got, say, a son and then your second's a daughter, like, cool. Like, why would you ever have a third child, right? Like, that makes no sense to people, because something our friends over at Family Team say all the time is, we live in a hyper individualistic society, and that reduces our role as fathers and husbands to
Mhm.
something as simple as just babysitting and putting comfort on the table for our children. And that's a pretty bad, like, what I'm getting at here is, I understand why there's such an opt out of resilient fathers in our world today, because we just look around and we see, well, what is here for me, really? I mean, there's two sides of the ditch, right? You have a toxic, uh, domineering and abuse of authority with all kinds of trauma and all kinds of hurt and all kinds of uh, uh, degeneracy. And then on the other side of the ditch, you have, I'm just not going to step into this role at all, and I'm going to be a perpetual grown child, or worse, right? And so you
Yeah.
have two ditches here, and we see the straight and narrow center of God's word calling men upward and onward to what it looks like to follow Paul as he follows Christ, and how do we understand Jesus as the archetypal, like, masculine Giga Chad of the world, who's ruling and reigning, and he's
Yes.
fully the lion, but he's also the lamb. And we only
Yeah.
talk about the lamb side in our culture today. There's never talk about the lion, and I know I'm getting Frank riled up about that right now, but
Yeah.
uh, that's
Yeah.
something I think we need to dive into more in future episodes too. But yeah, it goes all the way back to the beginning.
Well, what you're describing, if I could try to say it differently for other people who are maybe trying to grasp this, is everything in life has two ditches on either side of the, like, good and true version of it, in a sense. Like, sexuality is no different, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's the flippant version of sexuality where there is no stewardship of your body and you're actually living perpetually in immorality and sin. And then on the other side, there's like the whole celibacy culture that has made its way into parts of the church, and was actually so prevalent, like in the 1200s, all the way up through like 1600, after like Martin Luther was coming against a lot of that stuff, right? But that
Yep.
doesn't mean, like, because there's ditches that you just like, oh, it's like the truth is always somewhere in the middle. But it doesn't mean that sexuality just goes away and disappears. And the same thing with like the role of father. I want people to know, like, just like sexuality, like, you still have body parts, and God has still designed those body parts to do things. Like, it doesn't disappear. And fatherhood is no different. There is a mantle of leadership that is laid on the shoulders of every single father. And it doesn't matter whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, it is still there. And we have to give an account for that. And so, like, our goal and our hope in these conversations is, like, how do we help ourselves first and everybody else uh come even more center and find that true north of, like, what is it to be a father? What is it to be a masculine father in God's eyes? And then can we try to stay there and stay away from these ditches that society provides us on both the you know doing away with masculinity, or kind of the machismo, false hypervigilant masculinity that is also, I think, contrary to the gospel and to God's ways.
And like way
um
cringe too.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So um yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? How does this practically play out? As if somebody is taking on this perspective of father for the first time, and they're like, "Whoa, actually, yeah, I'm listening to what Chris and Jordan and Frank are saying, and it makes sense, but I've never really thought about it." Where do they go from here? Like, what are some of the first things that people can do to really begin to own this role of father, in your opinion?
I think it's really important, and this has helped me a lot too. And we keep saying father. I think there's a there's something that goes along with that, right? It's like a package deal. The way that God designed us as men and women, if to be a father for us as human beings is kind of implying that we're also a husband to a wife. So I think to be a great father, you also have to be a great husband, and vice versa. That's number one. Number two is it is important to remember that God himself, and we covered this earlier, Chris, you had brought it up, that we also call God Father. He is like, he's the Father, right? So that is, we have a perfect example set in front of us to actually try and emulate. So to your point of, you can go way too hard in either direction, all the way to the right or left, or extreme, not extreme, which is not right. In the center, which would be perfect, whatever that looks like, it's just the way that God is a father. It's the way that the Father is in every single way. Are we ever going to actually achieve that? Absolutely not. Should we ever stop trying? Absolutely not. So I think if we're ever lost on how we should be as a father or husband, if we look back to God and try to find whatever area it is that we're kind of like confused about, let's say it's punishment, like, oh, should I punish my kids for doing something that's wrong? I like to look back to, hey, how would God handle this kind of thing? It's like the what would Jesus do thing, but it's kind of a funny way to take it. People use it for different examples in the past, but parenting and
Jesus would come with a sword out of his mouth, and he would, like, oh, okay, I'd
yeah,
never thought about that, Frank.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, don't do that to your kids, guys. But I like to simplify this into saying usually to people of like, they're like, oh, well, it's all about love. It's all about love. Jordan brought this up with everybody focusing so much on the lamb side of Christ. Does the lamb side of Christ exist? Absolutely. Is it the only thing that we should focus on? Definitely not. We're ignoring the lion side. Again, that's not enough. It's not the extreme other side of it, but it's also not in the middle, so it's not right. Um, it is tough love still love? Yes, right? But people tend to think like, oh, when they think about love, it has to always be soft and weak in its kind of like the foundation of it, which is just not true. You can firmly show love as well. And I think we should do that as fathers. Otherwise your kids are going to run all over the place, and then they're going to be lost as adults because of us.
totally.
No, I think that's
Yeah, I
great.
mean,
Just to compliment what you're saying real quick, Frank, is I love how you started off by talking about the package deal idea. And this is so key because God himself is a package deal, right? We look in history and we look at the scriptures and we look in the reality around us and we see a Father, a Son, and a Holy Spirit existing in three co-equal persons, yet they're one essence. And that is the like Christian and even pre-Christian doctrine of the triune Godhead. And maybe that's something we could dive into in future episodes too, looking at the Trinity and Jesus in the Old Testament. But
yeah, the angel of Yahweh.
yeah,
Yeah,
like so it's so clear. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
yeah.
And I think the same is true in our families, right? With a father, a mother, and children. I remember reading an article. It was a secular psychology journal, and this was, gosh, maybe 15 years ago now. And it talked about it did a study of single fathers and single mothers and how the children, the outcome of their children when they grew up through adolescence and into adulthood. And basically, I'm summarizing from memory here, but I remember enough that it was staggering that this stuck with me. Essentially, the single mother who raised daughters and sons, whether it was one of each or several. And by the way, just as I don't think I have to even preface with this, but single moms are truly superheroes walking among us. Like, I don't know how they do it, but by God's grace and a lot of resilience. And
Totally.
I just think, when you look at that compared to single fathers who are intentionally raising their children or have custody of their children, that was kind of the two different camps that they studied. And the single mothers raised daughters who had clear evidence of father wounds and the whole daddy issues thing, and they were looking for male validation and affection and attention outside of, uh, in places that we would say that's not good, because they were lacking that. And then same thing with the sons who were raised by single moms tended to lack some of the more balancing characteristics and tendencies when it comes to having what a healthy father figure would look like in the family. But what was interesting is that the opposite wasn't true for the single father raising a daughter and a son. What you actually saw was an overwhelmingly positive and healthy adolescence up through young adulthood. And the daughters knew their worth and their value and their identity and how much they were loved and valued because they saw how their father cared for them and treated them and talked to them and interacted with them. And then the sons had that healthy male figure role model to grow up to and to emulate and to look like. And so the conclusion isn't, mothers are unnecessary. That's not at all. It's actually the contrary, that having both roles in the house fulfilled as God designed it is imperative for the healthy. Of course, there was challenges with the single fathers too, but by and large, it showed just how important the order and mantle of father it is in the household, even from a secular perspective. And so, as Frank was talking about that, I thought too of Acts 16 when Paul and Silas are freed from prison miraculously after singing hymns and praise and worship to the Lord, and then the doors just swing wide open. The Roman jailer, goes to draw his sword and is about to just kill himself because, if you don't know, back then you're a jailer and you're in charge of all the prisoners. If somebody escapes, the Roman government is going to come after you because you're responsible for them. But
Yeah.
before he ended himself, Paul and Silas cried out with a loud voice, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." And not to make this a whole Bible study, but I just wanted to highlight, I thought that's so powerful because earlier on in the story, before the doors are opened of the jail cells, it says that the prisoners heard Paul and Silas singing. So they were ministering from prison to these other, some believers, maybe some not, certainly, but they heard them and they were witnessing what they were doing and who they were worshiping and praising. So when this miracle happens, Paul and Silas now say, "We are all here." They're speaking on behalf of the whole jail, basically saying they know full well who just did this, and they recognize the authority that is on us through Jesus to basically make sure everybody submits to the lordship of Christ. And so then the jailer falls down on his knees before Paul and Silas, and he asks them the most important question any of us could ever ask: "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they tell him, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, you and your whole household, and you will be saved." And it says they arose that very hour, and the jailer took care of Paul and Silas, cleaned them up, bandaged their wounds, and he and his household repented, believed, and were baptized that same day. And it's like, well, wait a second. His wife and his kids and whoever else lives with him in his house, they weren't there when he
Yeah.
when he was there. Like, but the authority and the role and the position of the patriarch, he was the patriarch of his family. So what dad believes, the whole family believes. What dad does, the whole family does. What dad agrees with, everybody. Like, it's this
Yeah.
healthy submission because he is actually putting the needs of his family, his wife and his children ahead of his. And so they know for their best interest, we're going to obey and submit ourselves, not be subjugated, but submit ourselves to our Father's design. And this was from a pagan jailer who then got saved
Yes.
radically. So I just think it's so cool to think about that way as a package. And man, we need more of it. I mean, the whole lion and the
Totally.
lamb, right? Just looking at Jesus from balancing both of those. He was full of grace and full of truth. He was fully God and he was fully man. Like, you won't hear any of the Christian theologians and scholars debating if Jesus was more he was more human than he was God, right? No, he was
Yeah.
100% both. Just as he's 100% the conquering lion king and also the gentle lamb led to the slaughter, right? As Isaiah tells us. So we have to keep both of those in tension but in perfect balance. I think that's so key, so we represent Christ
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think I want to go back to the point you made about the study with the father and the mother. There's another one, I think it was done by Lifeway, and I think there's actually been a few different versions of this done that are very similar. But they basically did a meta-analysis. They kind of like looked at current adults and then surveyed back to like look at their childhood and like what that looked like, right? I can't remember the exact details, but it was something like if both parents were taking their children to church, there was like a 72% retention in the faith. If a single mother was taking her children to church, it was like 15%. But if a single father was taking his kids to church, it was 55% retention in the faith. So
Mm.
the overwhelming majority of the oomph behind like the faith experience with church attendance comes through the father. And there's other ones that have even lower numbers for the mom. It was something like, 4% for the mom and 48% for the dad or something like that. And it was like 10x more impactful for your father to be with you in the gathering of the saints than it is for your mom. And that's not because she doesn't have value. It doesn't have anything to do with value. It just has to do with God's design. And I can imagine a lot of people listening are like hearing you tell this story about the jailer and like, he and his whole household were saved. And it's like, well, yeah, it was like an oppressive male, like they, you got to do exactly what dad says. And I would argue that in a lot of these societies, there wasn't much in the way of kind of social protections and justice kind of orientations around legal systems and like all that. Like fathers were the ones that were trusted to guard and keep their families for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so there would have been this reality that everyone in his household would have known, which is like, dad loves me, has my best interest at heart, and my safety and security comes through my father first.
Yeah.
And if dad says, this is the way we're going, and I'm like, yeah, I'm all in.
Especially in those times, you know what I mean? Like if it's, you don't have technology and you're not covered by this like iron curtain of protection from, living in the United States or something like that. Like today, they felt that. Like they felt that on a very real level of like, dad is my protection between what the threats that exist out there and myself.
Yeah. And I think there's also this like sensitivity to the supernatural that exists outside of like our current Western, comfort experience. And that's why you see so many healings and all these supernatural things happening overseas, especially like in um, Middle East countries and Africa. It's like all over the place. And I think that they had that in kind of this ancient Middle Eastern Hebraic kind of culture as well, or like a Roman, I think, culture in the instance of Paul and Silas in jail. They would have had all these kind of superstitions and spiritual attunement, if you will. So for dad to come home and be like, the whole freaking jail shook and the doors fell off, and these like, I woke up and there was like, a divine earthquake that broke these people free. Like, yes, I believe in whatever God did that,
Yeah.
because we've been praying and giving blood sacrifices and like all this stuff to these freaking statues our entire life and never seen anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And your family's going to be like, yeah, okay, I'm with that guy.
Yeah.
I'm with that, whatever that is. So I think those are both aspects of it is there's a sensitivity to what God might do and a hunger and also just a trust and leadership from the role of father. So how would you guys close us out? Like what kind of encouragement would you give to dads, and maybe why should they stick around and explore further as we talk about kind of a more balanced biblical approach to father warfare tomorrow?
Well, I mean,
Tomorrow on the next episode. Sorry.
yeah. Maybe it's tomorrow. Who knows?
Yeah, hopefully.
But I guess probably the one thing I would bring up is we didn't touch really at all on any of our backgrounds or past or experiences, and I think those are important to bring into this kind of our walk, because nobody can ever truly walk in your exact set of shoes that you were in. Um, God has showed us our own lessons and things that we've learned during our walk, specifically for us, and to share them with others. So
Good
for
call.
myself, I'll say I came from a pretty unique place. I was not even a follower of Christ until about 3 years ago. So my walk was absolutely crazy, and I never would have pictured myself here. And I'm so happy that I am here. I'm excited to share that with people, and I know that there's going to be listeners out there, or viewers, I guess, if they're watching this on a video of sorts, that they feel like they're in the same place. Like, well, oh, I'm too far gone, or I'm not on this. Like, what's the straight and narrow path? I'm so far off of that. There's no way I'm ever getting back. I wouldn't even recognize it if I got there. I can tell you that you're wrong, because that's where I came from, and this is where I am now. And I can only speak for myself. And I know Chris and Jordan, you guys have your own walk, and I know that you have something really special to share with everybody as well.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Ditto. I think yeah, we all have unique challenges, unique experiences, and that's part of what makes this exciting and interesting. Because if we all had the exact same kind of different shade of gray background, it wouldn't
Yeah.
enhance. But the Lord is always doing something new. He's always working in and through us. And my encouragement would be to maybe a young dad out there, or a guy who's aspiring to be a father, or looking at, hey, I'm resonating with you guys. It's there's something, in my soul, in my heart of hearts, that's I'm aligned with you, but I don't really know what that looks like or what that means. I would say this: if you're a father, God's already equipped you with everything that you need. I mean, he's given you that role. It's not something you work towards. You work from that identity. And so embrace that, and just know that, just as we are born again believers who are following the Lord, we're not working from the promise, or we're not working to the promise, we're working from the promise. And so I think that's probably the best word of encouragement I can give. And similarly, when we talk about, oh, man, this is hard. I don't know where to start. There's not a lot of resources out there. There's not a lot of, you know, tools or little tidbits of knowledge. And there's some, but it's so hard to parse through, and you don't always know where people are coming from. Like, do your homework and
Yeah.
research who you're listening to, what their theological training is, what their life experience is, what's their background, right? Like, be a student of those whom you study under, because uh, you also need to know who is teaching you and influencing you. And so, uh, takes little steps at a time, step by step. The Lord leads us in our process of being sanctified and made more like Him and made more holy each day. And like Frank said, we'll never reach it, but it's that language Paul uses in his epistles. It's a
About the climb.
strive. It's a toiling. It's he's straining ahead and pressing on. Right, there's this willful, kind of gritty fight for the faith that we're all embarking on. And so we are honored to be uh, helping to encourage and inspire you guys along that road too.
There's always going to be another mountain. You're always going to want to make it move, but it's about the climb, right?
Amen. Which verse is that?
I'll get back to you.
I love it. I love it. Okay.
It's in the message.
So you bring up a good point, Frank. We totally failed to introduce our own personal stories, and I don't want to think more highly of myself than I ought to, but I do think that our backstories provide a lot of color for these conversations that I think will help inform other people. And to give you guys just a hint, and maybe we'll dive into this first thing in our next episode, but we all come from military background, law enforcement background, and one of the things the Lord told me through a pastor that was discipling me when I first believed. I was still in the military, and he said, um, "The Lord gave you this experience because He wanted to show you what warfare looked like, so that you were equipped to understand the strategies that are necessary and good for spiritual warfare, for kingdom operation." And Jordan, you said, uh, outpost earlier. We are all banner bearers for the King, and just like you have this mantle on your shoulders as a father, if you call yourself a believer, you are also a banner bearer for the King. You stand in your city right now, and there is no surprise to the enemy. They know that you call yourself a believer, that you're following Jesus, and you are standing with a flag planted in your front yard that says Kingdom Outpost. And every, component of the enemy is aware of your existence and your posture. Now, you can recognize that you're standing exposed, or you can recognize what's coming at you, and you can be prepared. You can be of the right mindset and all of that stuff. And I believe that the Lord brought all three of us through some similar experiences of growing in an understanding of modern, earthly warfare, to be able to inform and communicate to others like how we can approach life as a father in a really healthy and safe way. So we should definitely get into those stories, special operations world, all the deployments, all the stuff that we've learned, because I think there's so much that we can apply. But we'll save that for our next episode. I think it'll be most helpful and applicable there. But yeah, anything you guys would say in closing as we let these folks go?
Thank you guys for joining us in this. I mean, this is just as much a journey for us as it is for everybody listening. It's going to be awesome to kind of grow together in this. My first time doing this, so I'm kind of winging it with you guys listening.
Yes.
Yeah, no, let us know too in the comments, and we'll have some various forms of reaching out to us. What do you guys want to hear in the future? We have quite a healthy list of different ideas and topics and subjects we want to dig into, but certainly if there's audience born requests, we want to give the people what they want. And
we can whip out some tinfoil hats too if we need to.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Mine's bigger.
Yes. And over time, we'll let our personalities loose a little bit more, and we need to let Jordan's eye heal before he gets a little too rowdy on his end. So, but we're excited, like Frank said, to do this journey with you guys. And please, yes, let us know what you'd like us to talk about in the future, because ultimately we want to be here to serve you guys. So after we get through this first series of episodes to kind of lay the foundation from there, we want to go where you want to go and what would help and equip you fathers the most. This is an experiment of what is missing in the church. What's the thing that we can bring to the table that actually edifies and builds up and equips the church for the work of the ministry. And you, Father, are at the helm and at the front line of all of that. And so whatever we can do to serve and support and love on and teach and fight alongside you, we want to do that. So thank you guys for enduring this first episode. And if you are joining us after we've completed all of the other episodes of this series, jump into number 2. You're going to want to hear it, and it's going to bless you immensely, I believe. So we will see you on the other side. And this is the Resilient Household Podcast.